Hi guys, this is R.A. Sweeney here to talk to you about Nehemiah chapter 13 from the book Praying with the Writings, which is the fifth installment of the Praying with the Bible series. So I was just writing about Nehemiah chapter 13 here recently, and I noticed something came up four times in that one chapter. Nehemiah was kind of recounting what was going on, and then he had these quick little prayers asking God to remember. So it's here's what I was doing, and this happened, this happened, this happened. Remember that I did all this, God. And then, I did this too, and this. Remember how good I was, God. Um, and then the third one, it actually happened twice in three verses where he says, "Hey, I was doing this; these bad guys were doing this. So remember them, but I stayed faithful. So remember me." And it's always struck me as really kind of braggy that Nehemiah was talking like that. I always hated that part of the book of Nehemiah because it happened two other times in the book as well, where he's just talking and then he's like, "Hey, God, don't forget. I want to make sure that I get credit for all this stuff that I'm doing." Is how it always struck me, and it just bothered me. Why would you feel the need to do that? For one, like why wouldn't you think God notices what you do and pays attention to that sort of thing? But the other thing that really bugged me with it was he's bringing these things and he's like, "Hey God, see how great I am? Like clearly you should show me some favor. You should remember me, and like I should be, I should be pretty high in your book because look how great all these things that I'm doing are." Um, and as I was going through the book of Nehemiah this time, he's a complicated person. A lot of times, especially in the church that I started going to church in, loved Nehemiah. They thought he was the best thing ever. A lot of other people I know in my community all think Nehemiah is this example of someone who's just awesome. And when you read the contemporary prophets and things like that, you just find no. The prophets were all very critical of Ezra and Nehemiah, and their actions are really not in line with the Torah. And so they're pretty compromised people. So I've always been very critical of Nehemiah, but going through this last time, I realized it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, he's doing the best he can in a bad situation, and he wants to do the right thing. I think that's pretty clear in the writings that he wants to do what's right. He's passionate about it. He makes sacrifices to go do what's right, and he does a really bad job. I don't think there's any way around that. Of he did not do a good job of doing the right thing. He did some pretty wrong things. Um, but overall he's very concerned about that, and so when you bring this repeated like, "Hey God, don't forget that I did these things," with that sort of perspective, I think what's going on is this lack of confidence that he had, this uncertainty. It seems like he's like, "Hey God, I did these things, and man, I don't know if I should have been doing these things. So God, remember that I did these, and really remember me for good." And then, "Oh man, I did these things and I hope those were right. So remember me, God." It really seems like he's trying to talk God into thinking that he's a good person. It's like he's trying to really highlight what he's unsure about, that God would look upon him with favor. And so that was really where I went with this entry, was just that focus on, if he would reflect on his own prayers, I think that would stand out for him of like, man, I'm always asking God to remember that I'm doing good things. Like, why do I feel the need to keep asking those things? Which I think is a great question for ourselves as well. How often do we reflect on our prayers? If I was to write down all of the prayers that I pray over the course of a week or a month or whatever the case may be, and really went back and looked at like, what are the themes of my prayer life? What sorts of things am I praying about? How am I praying? When am I praying? What would that really say about me? What would that say about my walk with God and my trust in Him, my commitment to His purposes? Which is a hugely convicting question to ask, because when I start reflecting on how much am I praying for God's purposes, how much do my prayers reflect my commitment to God? That's a pretty personal question. It's a pretty um, challenging question to come face to face with. Wow, maybe my prayers are pretty selfish. Maybe my prayers are, not really desiring God, but just, reaching out to Him when things are tough. Maybe my prayers are fake. I'm just praying what I think God wants to hear, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of different conclusions that we can come to, but it really got me thinking about how often do we reflect on our own prayer life to see what that tells us about ourselves and our Christian walk. So that was my big takeaway. Is I think that's something that would be healthy for us to do, something that we need to do, is really reflect on our prayer lives so that we can bring those reflections to God, and reflect with God in the process, just to see where do we need to grow, where are we falling short, and how can we draw closer to God in our prayer life. So that was what I wrote about in Nehemiah chapter 13. I hope it was a blessing for you. I hope it's a challenge for you as well. I know it was a challenge for me. So pray with that, and be blessed by it. Thanks, guys.